Good morning, everyone. My name is Beth, and I am with the Education Alliance. At the Education Alliance, our mission is to bring businesses and communities together to support public schools, and we are passionate about helping students explore career opportunities. One of the ways that we do that is through a program like this, which is our work-based learning program, which we connect students with industry professionals so they can gain real-world insights and experiences. And today, I am very excited to introduce Lilla from the United States Probation Office, and she is going to give us a first-hand look at this career. Thank you, Lilla, for joining us today.
Hi, so happy to be here. I love what I do. I love our agency, and anytime I get to share that with people, it makes my day. So glad to be here. Again, my name is Lilla Adkins. I am a supervisory United States Probation Officer. What that means is that I have made it to a level that's higher than just a probation officer, that I supervise a team of other probation officers. So that's what that title means. I work in the Southern District of West Virginia. So I just decided to do a little slide because I figured it might be a little confusing. I know you guys are in the Northern District, correct? Like you guys are up here somewhere, right? Yeah. So so the Southern District of West Virginia, it's not like local probation offices, which would work by county or by state. This actually works by districts, and we have 94 different districts in the United States, two of which are in West Virginia. So in West Virginia, we have the Northern District of West Virginia and the Southern District of West Virginia. Obviously, I'm in Kanawha County in Charleston, so I work for the Southern District of West Virginia. We have 4 division offices in Charleston, Beckley, Huntington, and Bluefield. In your district, in the Northern District of West Virginia, you guys would have Wheeling, Clarksburg, Martinsburg, and Elkin. So that's where the main offices are, and officers would cover all of that part of the state. They just would report to that office, or individuals under supervision would have to report to those offices if they need to meet with a probation officer who they're assigned to. So that's how we're made up. So I'm not sure, where you all are in government class, but I think we can all start very simply that there are 3 branches of government. The legislative branch, who makes the laws, the executive branch, who certifies the laws, and then the judicial branch, who interprets the laws. So we, unlike other federal law enforcement, are under the judicial branch. So that makes us a little different than other law enforcement officers that you may know, which are in the executive branch. So as I'm a federal law enforcement officer, most people think of FBI, DEA, ATF. Unfortunately, those are our counterparts, and we're colleagues, and we work similar things, but we have a very different role. We are in the judiciary for a reason. We are the eyes and ears of the courts. People will say we report to judges and not the president. So sort of how we're made up. How many of you are familiar with other federal law enforcement agencies? Obviously, FBI. I watch all those Netflix shows. Those are my favorite. But anyway, moving on. Okay. So what we do is kind of complicated. Most people don't really understand what we do. I didn't really understand what federal probation officers do. By the way, federal probation officers and United States probation officer, we use that word interchangeably depending on who we're talking to and how formal or informal the title is. So if you hear me say federal probation officer, it's the same thing as a United States probation officer. But this is a highlight of what we do in kind of a quick 3-minute version. I will tell you that I want you to pay attention to just kind of the different times the person sees a probation officer and their different roles and what they are doing, because there's very different aspects of our job. And just because you're a United States probation officer doesn't mean you do all of them. You might only do one specific part. So I want you to kind of pay attention to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you guys need it turned up.
This is Sam. He's an imaginary character, a guy who made some bad choices and fell into the drug trade. Federal agents have arrested Sam. He is charged with possession with intent to distribute cocaine. As he makes his way through the judicial system, probation and pretrial services will bookend his journey. A pretrial service officer interviews Sam soon after his arrest. The officer prepares a pretrial services report to help the judge decide whether Sam should be detained or released. The report tries to gauge Sam's likelihood of appearing at future court hearings and the danger he may pose to the community. The officer believes Sam is a low risk. Based on Sam's history, the judge decides it's okay to release him. But he can't leave the jurisdiction, is subject to random drug testing, and must report regularly to his pretrial services officer. Sam complies with all the conditions of his pretrial release. Months later, after consulting his lawyer, he decides to forego a trial. Because of his criminal history and the evidence against him, he pleads guilty. Now it's up to the judge to decide Sam's sentence. The judge orders the probation office to prepare a pre-sentence report. The pre-sentence report builds on the pre-trial report. It includes Sam's criminal history, the impact of his crimes on others, possible restitution to victims, the prospects for rehabilitation, and relevant sentencing guidelines. Sam is worried. He could be sentenced to 5 years in prison, but instead, the judge orders him to serve 2 years, followed by 3 years of supervised release. When Sam gets out of prison, he's placed under the supervision of Jill, a probation officer. If Sam violates the terms of his supervision, he could go back to prison. This happens to about 1 in 5 people under federal supervision. Jill tries to support Sam by arranging drug counseling, helping him to find a job or go back to school, and coaching Sam on making better decisions. Jill will make unannounced visits to Sam's home and job to see how he's doing, in order to prevent small setbacks from becoming big problems. By the time Sam finishes his supervision, he should be a better decision maker who has fulfilled his responsibilities to the victim or community, committed no new crimes, and is prepared for continued success.
All right, so I know there was a lot there, but basically the United States Probation Office is going to be the very first person, once they're arrested by another federal agency, like we talked about, FBI, CIA, ATF, they're going to be brought to the courthouse and they're going to meet a United States Probation Officer. And that's going to be the very first time that they meet someone on our side of the house. And that person is going to prepare a report, a pretrial report that will then get determined whether they get bond. If they get bond or they don't get bond, they still will have a pre-sentence report. That's maybe another officer that does only pre-sentence reports. And then once they're sentenced and they come back out, they will always serve a term of supervised release. Not always, but in 90% of the cases, they will serve a term of supervised release, which is much like parole, but a little bit different. So they're going to have perhaps maybe another probation officer or the same officer, depending on what role that probation officer plays in that district. So essentially, we will see them from the very beginning until the very end of the process. And in between that, our roles kind of change very differently. Sometimes it's to make sure that they're going to be able to go to trial or go to prison, and sometimes it's to rehabilitate them, get them services, and get them back into the community. So our roles change very often throughout the process. So these are some of the duties that we have. Obviously, we gather information through interviews with people involved in the court process and their family, friends, and other members that they may know. We conduct investigations and prepare reports while using a wide range of technology. We are pretty much at the forefront of technology when it comes to supervision and the things that we do, and the way that we supervise people and investigate people. We submit recommendations to the court during pretrial proceedings, sentencing, and during community supervision, and during other phases of the judicial process. So we're always there to inform the court of what they are doing, good, bad, or indifferent. If we need modifications or assistance, we're always there to prepare that information. We maintain personal contacts with individuals released to the community and support compliance in pretrial phase and help facilitate successful reentry to the community after prison, which we've discussed. And we implement evidence-based practices that are tailored to the individual, and we use a variety of techniques to promote community safety. So we we'll talk a lot about how we're different than regular probation officers, and not to say that some aren't getting there, but we're kind of at the forefront in terms of understanding that this is a not one size fits all. So we do not have a list of people that we have to see every month. We don't check boxes. We really tailor supervision to the person and what their risks are. And we use evidence-based practices, which are basically practices that are proven to have effect. So we're not going to make people do things that aren't going to help them just because we can. We're not going to make them report unnecessarily. We're not going to make them go to treatment if they don't need it. We are not a box checking agency. We really do have the ability to kind of tailor what someone needs and help them, because that's ultimately our goal. So the role of a probation officer is wide and vast. So a lot of times we say that we wear two hats. We are both social workers and we are both law enforcement. So I will tell you, and we'll get into it a little bit in a little later down in the presentation, but we are federal law enforcement. We carry guns, we have badges, we are trained to defend ourselves. We do all of that cool law enforcement stuff. But most of our job is making sure that we are helping the community in ways that this person has not been met with yet. So our job is not to lock them up. Our job is to help them get through supervision. And so a lot of that times we're going to be meeting with their families. We're going to be getting them resources. We're going to be getting them education. We're going to be tying them to local resources to get them through. We're more a social work agency, but because we're dealing with sometimes very dangerous, sometimes very manipulative people, we also have to be law enforcement officers. We have to be able to defend ourselves, but more often than not, that law enforcement aspect is only there when we need it to protect the community. 80% of the time, we are a social service organization. That's what makes us very much different than other federal law enforcement. So what does it take to be a good probation officer? I made these slides just kind of off the cuff because I really want you guys to know like what it's going to take. Can I be a probation officer? I can tell you when I started in community corrections, I had never met a criminal. I'd never been to a jail. I didn't even know what they did at the job I was applying to. I just needed a job with county benefits. But I found myself in this role where in order to be a great probation officer, you have to be empathetic. Because like I said, we're not a lock 'em up agency. We're not power strong. We want to help people. You have to have a high level of integrity. So you work for federal judges, and I will remind you that federal judges are appointed by the president. So at any point in time, you are one step away from the president. And I take that very seriously, that if I was confirmed by a judge, the same oath that the United States president takes, that he will defend the Constitution, we take the exact same oath when we get signed in. So it's the integrity, what we say, how we say it, what we write, when we write it, how we talk to people is very, very, very important in our job. You have to be highly organized because there's a lot going on. Dedicated to public service. So don't get in this job because you want the retirement. Don't get in this job because you think you're going to be able to run around with guns and be cool and drive cool cars. Don't do that because more often than not, you have to be in this role to help people because it's going to be really difficult for you to do that. Maybe there's other law enforcement agencies you might want to apply for, but ours is going to be really because you really want to be a public servant. You want to make sure your community's safe. You want to make sure your person is being served with respect and integrity. A multitasker, that's almost anything these days, but our day changes from day to day, problem to problem. Inquisitive, you have to have an investigatory mindset. Like you have to want to get to the bottom of whatever you're looking for. So it could be that you're investigating someone's past and you need to dig up records, but it could also be that you're interviewing someone and you think there's just something they're not telling you or they're circling around the problem. You really have to want to get to the bottom of it. Like I said, we don't box check. And we really try to figure out what's going on through various ways to make sure we get to the bottom of it. And then you have to be brave. So I put that on there. I actually asked whether that's an appropriate bullet point because it's a weird word to use, but you have to be able to stand on your recommendations. So you have to be brave in the courtroom. You have to be brave in the field when you're going into people's houses with who knows where and, their families and their family members that maybe don't want you there. So you have to be brave in the field, but you also have to be brave to confront noncompliance when someone does something wrong in that moment. So you have to be brave in those things. And that doesn't mean physically brave, it just means emotionally and confidence brave.
Do you care if I stop right there for
Yeah, go ahead.
some questions maybe?
Yeah.
You just gave us a lot of information, and
Yeah.
I know I
Sorry.
had a couple questions. No, it's great information. I've learned so much already. Especially when you said that you guys are social workers and law enforcement. Because when I think of someone in law enforcement, I don't think I would think of the social work aspect of it. And so really, it was eye-opening to see you have two jobs in one, essentially. But I just wanted to give the students some time to ask questions, and I did have another question, and I just wanted to know, and I know you're going to be talking to us about the qualifications, but
Mhm.
I'd like to know what type of backgrounds in education do most of the people come from? Um, you said that wasn't necessarily what you were looking for, so tell me a little bit about what you had studied and how that led to what you're doing.
So we have a very different qualification than even state probation officers. Like the state of West Virginia to be a probation officer, you have to have from pretty strict qualifications. Ours is very broad because we want people to come from very different aspects because we supervise people from various aspects. So most people come from a related field. So it's either criminal justice, social work is a big one, psychology, sociology, legal studies. Nowhere in there does it say like ninja skills. Like, we really want people that are able to use their mind and work with people and understand the legal system. But your relevant work experience matters. I have a degree in political science. It has nothing to do with what I do, but I got a job in community corrections, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the background experience of people that we have in our agency are people that come from local probation or parole offices, from child protective services, day report centers, which are community correction programs. We have lawyers, we have accountants, we have former police officers, and other federal law enforcement agents that maybe come from a different agency that maybe want to have a different aspect of the job that maybe didn't quite fit for them. So I came from a political science background. I got a job working at the Kanawha County Day Report Center. For me, it opened the doors. I always wanted to go to law school, but it was because I wanted to help people navigate the legal system. It was never like punitive. I just really wanted, I loved history and I loved the legal system, and I really just wanted, I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if you guys could see that. I had some weird pop up. But I wanted to be able to help people through the legal system. And when I found myself in this job, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have way more effect on an individual through the legal system than their lawyer, than the defense counsel, than the United States attorney, than judges. They meet with them for a moment in time. It's a very short moment. They help them through a very short process. But a federal probation officer is there through the longevity. I know more about these people's children than perhaps my friends' children, just because I'm dealing with them a lot. And so for me, that's kind of what was rewarding, is to be a part of the legal system, but in a more helpful way. And so if you're looking at possibly being something in a service organization, or you want to work with people, but you want to also have some of that good background, because I will tell you that sometimes those entry-level jobs, parole officers and CPS, it's hard work and the pay isn't great, but there are agencies that you can then rise to, which would be one of ours, hopefully. But there's a lot out there. We at the federal system prosecute lots of different things. It's not just guns and drugs. It's tax evasion. I know you guys are a business class, and so it's tax fraud. It's illegal use of funding. There's illegal wire transfer. All of those things are people that we would supervise. And sometimes we even supervise businesses, if that makes any sense. That if there's a business that's not using a practice, we would have to supervise that business. So we need people who understand business to work for us so that they can help supervise that appropriately. I don't know anything about business, but I have counterparts that are accountants and lawyers, and they understand all that tax stuff, and so they would supervise that case. And so we reach a broad net because we want all of those perspectives to come in our agency. We don't want to be just law enforcement. Any questions about that before I get into like our benefits? No. Okay. We'll go here. Okay, so I will say that we have competitive pay. I know everyone wants to know like what do people make, and I went and pulled the most recent posting. You can be a probation officer and not, let's say you don't have related information, related education or maybe experience, but you're smart and you're a go-getter and you pass some kind of qualifications and we interview you, we can hire you as a probation officer assistant. And what that does is that it will let you start off as a temporary to see if you can do the work. And so your pay is a little smaller, but then eventually if you meet the qualifications, you get that 1 or 2 years under your belt, you can then become a United States probation officer. Full disclosure, I started as a probation officer assistant. My spouse is also a federal probation officer. He started as a probation officer assistant. So that's very common. It's not, it's actually a really good thing. You lower qualifications, get in the door, and then prove yourself. So that is the salary range. If you notice, the top end of the salary range for United States probation officers is $113,000. I don't know very many jobs in West Virginia where you could be doing what we do in a service organization and still make that sort of money. It's a really great career for that, for being in this field. Now, that's just a United States probation officer. That doesn't count any promotions that you might get. We have senior officers, and then you could be a supervisor, and you can be an assistant deputy chief, and there's other things that go higher. It's just that's usually your base salary. We have a mandatory retirement age of 57. So we have to retire at 57 because, again, we have to be brave and we have to be fit and we have to deal with people who are dangerous. And so oftentimes they want us to be able to retire. Now you have to have 20 years of service, which means you have to be hired before you're 36 years old. So if you want to do this job, start thinking about it. Don't wait till you're 36 to try and apply because we cannot hire you. You have to have 20 years of service because you have to retire at 57. Now, after 20 years of service, let's say you start at 27, technically you only have to be 50 years old to retire. So you can retire anywhere between 50 and 57 as long as you have 20 years of service. So that's also very cool. I know you guys are young and don't really think about that, but let me just tell you, it's a very cool part of the job. We have a really great pension. So most people only have like a 401k, but our pension is awesome. We have great medical coverage. We offer great life insurance and a great thrift savings plan, which is like our 401k. The coolest part about our agency compared to other agencies that do the exact same thing that we do is our training. Our initial training is at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. It's called FLETC. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that in shows or whatever, but every federal law enforcement goes to a FLETC. So we're there with FBI agents, Border Patrol. We're there down there. Our training is different, but we're still interacting with the same federal law enforcement officers. That's in Charleston, South Carolina, and it's a 6-week program. So you'll leave your families for 6 weeks. Now, you're right by the beach. It's weather's great. It's beautiful. It's the best time ever. But then after that, you'll come back and we will train you. I actually took note because I've been working there for 12 years. And I have been to Arizona, Chicago, Charlotte, Minneapolis, New York, DC 5 times, Orlando, Houston, Kansas City. I might be forgetting some, but just in that 12 years, I've been to all those cities for trainings. We will invest in you. We want our officers to be the best at what they do, not only just with the work, but like wholly and professionally and leadership training and those kinds of things. And so we really do invest in our training. The other cool thing is that there's various career paths within the organization. And hopefully I can talk about that very quickly because I know we're kind of getting there. But within our organization, so like I said, I'm a supervisor probation officer. We have other specialties. Once you become a probation officer and you can prove that you know the job, you can then specialize. So let's say you're really great at guns and training and firearm training or physical training. You can become a firearms or safety instructor, and that will be your specialty, and you will train other probation officers to do that. Let's say your experience is in financial investigations. You really like numbers. So you're going to be a senior officer in financial investigations. So if you're an accountant or a business person, that's your senior specialty. You'll help other officers do that. My senior specialty was in drug and alcohol treatment. And so for me, I was the person that procured federal contracts. And so to link this back to your business, the one cool business thing that we do is that I myself am able to go out in the Southern District of West Virginia, find programs that I think will qualify, secure a contract, then make sure that our people under supervision can attend those programming. And we don't do that outside of our agency. I do that. And so then I make sure that they're able to get drug training or programming everywhere throughout the state that we can, and we pay for it. But I have to make sure that that federal funding has been spent right. I have to make all these procurement rules. So there's a lot of financial business part. So if that interests you, you could do that. Electronic monitoring. I mean, there's so many different things. And I want to tell you that actually last year, I was able to apply for a position that I have now, which is that I'm actually on special project. It's called a TDY. I'm a special project on loan, let's say, from the DC office. So currently I report to Washington, DC, and I'm in charge of building training modules for the entire country just based on treatment and treatment services. So what I was doing in district, I'm now helping train officers throughout the entire country. So I'm a federal law enforcement officer. I'm full-time remote, sitting in my house, building training modules to train other officers. And so for me, knowing that you can grow and expand in different ways that really matters to you within an organization is huge. You don't usually find that. It's usually one track and then you retire. But the fact that we can kind of go all over the place is really kind of where I think the intrinsic value for our job is. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that you'll see a lot of these things. Again, these are pictures I got offline, so I didn't violate any laws. But you know, we are in the courtroom. We train safety. We shoot guns. We go to academies. We are physically trained. We get really cool government cars to do our work in. We get the latest tech. I get a new computer every 2 years, like a new iPhone every 2 years. I get an Apple Watch every 2 years. So like we get all of the cool tech because they want us to be safe and innovative. But mostly the thing that we do is the last picture on the right, on the bottom, and mostly what we do is help people. So we get all of those perks and it's really, really cool. But at the same time, our job truly means we're making people better. And at the same time, if they can't be better, we're also protecting the community by putting them back in prison. And so we have to be able to juggle that. But most of our job is finding resources and helping people get better. So I don't know very many other law enforcement agencies that have that as their mission, but that's what we do. That's it. So quick and dirty. What questions do you guys have for me? What do you guys want to do when you grow up? Anybody know?
They have a few questions that they got together this morning.
Oh, good.
How many people are on federal probation in WV, like West Virginia?
So you have to understand we're the federal system. So I don't know about state probation, but in the Southern District of West Virginia, there's about 600 individuals that are just on post-conviction. Remember, there was that pretrial bond part and then the post-conviction. I don't know the pretrial numbers off the top of my head, but there's usually around 200-ish. And there's about 600 post-conviction. But again, that's the lower part of the state. So if you double that, would probably be a good number. Caseloads are, sorry to interrupt, I'll just say a caseload, like a typical officer who is supervising someone would supervise 40 to 50 cases.
Oh, wow. All right, go ahead, Dave.
Have you ever experienced dodge cuts? Doge, whatever, however you pronounce it.
Oh, the stuff that's going on right now? That's a really great question. And that's the reason why I did that slide. Or if you remember, we are part of the judicial branch. And so if I can get there quickly, if you remember, so the president can only decide what the executive branch does. He can cut, executive orders, but it only applies to the executive branch. So those law enforcement positions that we talked about earlier, those ATF, DEA, those people might be subject to all of that. I don't know. But luckily, because we work for the judicial office, we are the only law enforcement agency that works in this arm of the government. So we are technically, I don't want to say safe, but we are technically unaffected. It would take the judges having to then bring over some of those things into the judicial system and then start. But for now, we are unaffected. I did not get the email this weekend, although we did discuss it. So it's kind of a scary time for all federal workers, but luckily we are kind of safe over in this other branch.
The teachers here kind of had a laugh this morning because everybody was on the news saying that it was degrading to have to make a list of what they do each week. And I said, you know who makes a list of what they do each week? Teachers.
Yes. So I think the issue is that I have been part as a professional employee, you're going to at some point write down what you do every day because
Right.
that's part of what you do. I think the difference is that when some random person sends you an email on a Saturday asking you to do it, they're not your supervisor. That's a little strange. But yes, it does affect a lot of the people we know and a lot of the agencies we work with. We don't quite know how that's going to work out, but we are technically unaffected.
That's great. You want me to ask the last one? If you have somebody that you're supervising on probation and they do whatever they're not supposed to do, like you tell them they can't do this or that and they do it, and then they go back to prison or they go to prison, where do they go? In West Virginia or somewhere else?
Okay, so if they ever have to return back to custody, the federal system is also like how we're staged. It's a nationwide program. So they have the Bureau of Prisons. It's called the BOP or the Bureau of Prisons. And just like there's state jails, there's just like there's county jails, state jails, there's also federal jails, and those federal jails are scattered throughout the entire country. We try to keep people close to where they live so that their families can visit. But because it's a federal system, if we have overcrowding in prisons like Hazelden, do you guys know where that is? It's in your district, I think, near Morgantown. We have several prisons in West Virginia that they would likely go to. However, if there's overcrowding, or perhaps if they have a certain need, like they're a medical, like let's say they're ailing in health, there's only certain medical facilities throughout the country. So they might have to go to Texas because that prison can help them with their health needs or their mental health needs. And so more often than not, if it's just a general case, it's going to go somewhere to a federal prison. But like I said, those federal prisons are not county or state based. It's a federal system. So they might be 2 or 3 hours away. They might be 6 hours away. They might be across the country, depending on the needs. And the Bureau of Prison works that way so that they can kind of shuffle around people as they need to because we're a federal system. Now, they might be holding in the county until we can prove the allegations, right? So they'll get arrested. They'll go to a county jail until we can have a hearing and prove it. But if they have to go back for an extended term or they're sentenced or resentenced to term, they will go to a federal prison. And that could be various different places. Like, you know, Martha Stewart came to Alderson, West Virginia. She's clearly not, it's a low level facility for women. And so she came there. So we use the type of facility more so than the location.
Okay.
Some great questions. Are there any more questions, comments?
I have
Yeah.
a question, Beth. What are the type of crimes that folks that you work with have been involved in? Is it mostly drugs? Is it, because a lot of times you hear federal crime, it's white collar type stuff, embezzlement and that kind of thing. So,
Right. So I probably should have talked about the difference between a federal crime and a state crime. So think about a federal crime as something that affects things across all states. So you can get a drug crime in Kanawha County, West Virginia, because you were selling drugs in Kanawha County and they don't have any kind of proof that you traveled to Kentucky to buy your drugs. But if you have proof that you're tied to an organization that has distributed drugs across state line, that can then become a federal crime. So it could be the exact same crime. It just has to be tied to across state borders. So if you kill someone in Charleston, West Virginia, and it's just a crime of passion, it just happens, cool. But if you kill someone in Charleston, West Virginia, and then you decide to drive to Kentucky to dump the body, that now becomes a federal crime. If you used your phone or the internet to facilitate that, the internet and telephones are governed by the federal agencies. And so therefore it becomes a federal crime. So most of what we do in the Southern District of West Virginia, I'm not sure how the Northern District is, but I think they're probably a lot like us, that drugs is a really big problem in the Southern District of West Virginia and in the Northern District of West Virginia. And we are between two, they call them rock lines. So Detroit and Charlotte, people come through our state all the time. If they're pulled over and they're not from here, but they're found with drugs, we can almost prove that they're from Detroit or Charlotte or DC or wherever, then it becomes a federal crime because it's not locally based. So mostly guns and drugs. So if you are a felon and you become a felon for some reason, and then you're found with a gun and you're not allowed to have a gun, that's also a automatic federal felony. So guns and drugs are our primary offenses, but we also have wire fraud, tax fraud. We have a few immigration cases, very, 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 very small. Sex offenses, so internet, sex offenses, child pornography. So just that's while I have a high school audience, please be careful what you send over the internet. Just a PSA while I have your attention. Pictures, text messages, things that are sent over over phones, even if it's Snapchat, can all be recovered. And just know that sometimes you can find yourself in a situation that is illegal, and you need to very much be careful what you send, share over the internet and through your phone systems, because that could tiptoe into a federal crime. As high schoolers, I know you all are young, you might have younger friends. Let's just leave it at that. Be very careful to keep private things private and not over that, because you can get strung up into a federal indictment.
Wow, that was a really great way to end today's lesson.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. And seriously, that was the best way to end this.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all the information. I learned a ton today myself. I was taking notes just for myself. Super interesting. And I love that there's so many ways to grow and expand in this career, and that they invest in you.
These guys have to go to the
And there's various career paths within your organization. It's very interesting. So
Yeah.
that's all the time that we have today. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. We hope that this has given you some insight into a different career path and some real world skills that you can use for your future. And as a reminder, our business learning modules take place every Monday. And if you miss a session, the recordings are available starting on Tuesday mornings. And you can go to our website, educationalliance.org, and search for work-based learning. Thank you.
Thanks.